Hey guys, Kelade here. Welcome to my patch 8.2 The Eternal Palace gear guide. In this video, we're going to show you guys the best gear that you can get from the Eternal Palace, the upcoming raid, and differently from our gear guides previously, we're also going to show you the best in slot from the entire game as a whole, not just only from the raid. But first, the talents that I'm using to sim is just their basic single target talents. I did use anger management for some of the sims, but it didn't really beat Siegebreaker still. As far as for essences, I did use the best in slot essences that you can get eventually later on in the game, which is the rank 3 condensed life force as the major, and then the Crucible of Flame rank 3 as the minor. I did also sim with currently what you can basically get as the best, which is rank 3 blooded enemy, and rank 2 Crucible. Results were basically the same, so don't worry about how the essences might impact it in the future, unless obviously they get nerfed. So first up, starting with the Eternal Palace base gear guide. So right here you have basically all the slots filled out with the gear from each boss. Of course, down in the description, you guys can find a link to the spreadsheet. If there's any updates, I will update it in the spreadsheet and you guys can have that saved. But first things first, the biggest thing that you can get from the raid that you might not have been able to get earlier are these shoulders, the Trench Titan shoulder plates, which seem to be really nice because this is the first time for these shoulders that we're able to get Cold Steel Hot Blood, Reckless Flurry, and Overwhelming Power on one shoulder piece, right? So it does look like it's pretty valuable, right? You can actually go with a triple Cold Steel Hot Blood, triple Overwhelming Power setup with Unbridled Ferocity, Reckless Flurry, and Simmering Rage. That's something that was impossible to do before this raid. Now, that seems really good, but for some reason, Reckless Flurry, it's simming okay. It's not doing the best. Now, from the raid, it's still really good. The other thing to note, as far as for what you want to roll on, so here's all the links of all the bosses, right? Here's the best in slot loot that comes from this list. You basically, when you're rolling with your coins, you want to go for things like Azurite pieces, weapons, and trinkets, right? Those three things are probably the most important. Now, the trinkets for both the raid and Mechagon dungeon, they're not working out perfectly, so those might be subject to change, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I'll probably release another video once those things get fixed, because Mechagon has those rings where if you have one equipped, you combine it with the second ring, something happens, it's not working perfectly. And then trinkets, of course, some of the on-use stuff isn't working out too well, like Razor Coral is just not being used at all, but it's still simming not that poorly for some reason. So definitely heads up on that. That could also mean the just equip and non-active trinket just aren't that good in the raid probably, right? If the active trinkets in the raid are simming similarly to the passive ones or the non-active ones, doesn't bode well for them. But one thing I think you'll find new raid that might change up your Azurite trait setup is a trait called Undulating Tights. Your damaging spells and abilities have a chance to crash away upon your target for 6,567 damage. And then of course also when your health drops below 50%, you can gain Absorb Shield for 51,000 within 8 seconds, and it can occur for 45 seconds. Now, it does seem like the damage of it and the proc rate seems to be pretty good, so it's simming relatively well on sims. But the other thing about this is the fact that it's an offensive ability that also has a defensive aspect to it, so it seems like this might be a must-have, and it might be a bit OP for PvP, because it's just going to activate by itself, and it activates every 45 seconds, so you know, if you guys do PvP and PvP together, this might be something you want to get. Now, there's 2 of them you can get in the raid, or there's 2 slots that have them. So that's why Azurite traits here. You still definitely want 1 Unbridled Ferocity no matter what. And then you're going to want 1 to 3 Cold Steel Hot Blood, depending on, I guess, how many you can get your hands on. Undulating Tides is great, and then Reckless Flurry and Simmering Rage kind of round that up. And that's just from the gear from the raid, right? And of course, we'll talk about the rest of the stuff later on. And then third ring Azurite traits, it's still the same as always. Overwhelming Power is the absolute best in slot. Gut Ripper, Heed My Call, or any other trait that gives mastery or crit, especially the crit, is okay there too. But Overwhelming Power, if you can have it, that's kind of where all of our gear revolves around. And then as far for the rest of the gear from the raid, the other only thing that's really good is the waist. The Eternity Keeper's Great Belt. That does seem to be pretty good because it has an effect right here. Storm up the Eternal rises for 10 seconds every 2 minutes, dealing 18,000 arcane damage 3 times to a random enemy within 60 yards. And then all Storm the Eternal effects occur simultaneously. There's a few pieces of gear within this raid that has that Storm of the Eternal effect. We don't really know exactly how it's going to work out. We'll see once we get the gear. But it does seem like, you know, it's great. It's a, you know, waist that just has random mass damage from it. Perfect, right? So you definitely want this. This is going to be best in slot for both the raid and just in the game as a whole. Now, this does draw from Queen Ashara, so obviously getting a mythic one might be a little bit difficult, but you do want one if you can't get one. And then for weapons, right, it's just generally the weapons from the raid are going to be the highest because weapons have a cap of they can only go 10 eye levels from Warforging, right? So you want the weapons that have the highest base are probably going to be the ones you end up using, kind of like how Dawnbreaker worked out in BOD. That's how the Tentacle Crusher or the Monstrosity Shipbreaker is going to work out in the current raid. Now, these two weapons, they do have different like stats on them, right? One is crit versatility, one is haste mastery, but they sim very, very similarly. So I guess for now, it doesn't really matter what you get. You just kind of want the highest eye level that you can get on them. And then as far as for how it's laid out, it's actually very interesting. If you look at the best in slot helmet just from the raid, right? The helmet comes from Radiance of Zara. That's the third boss. Shoulders come from Blackwater Behemoth. That's the second boss. Chest comes from Abyssal Commander Savara. That's from the first boss. So you can actually get geared relatively quickly in the new raid, right? The first three bosses basically drop the best Azerite in the entire raid. So that's looking good for us there, right? You're not too worried about having to wait too long or having too many things stuck behind Azara. Obviously, the waist, which is really, really good, that is stuck, but that's fine. So that's it for the Eternal Palace best in slot. Now, as far as for stat weights, it's the same as before, right? Because you're still using Coastal Hot Blood, so haste and crit is going to be up there for you, and then mastery, and then versatility is going to be last. And of course, I labeled the best bosses to coin, right? If you only have 2 coins, you might want to coin those 2. I selected these 2 bosses because they have Azure traits and a weapon too, and then maybe as a third, if you have more coins, you can do Orgoza, or you can do like a heroic Azara if you want to try to get the belt. And if you guys are curious, like when I put the Azure here, like what Azure I actually use, you scroll down here and you come over to the right side, you can see the piece that's selected and then the Azerite that did win out for these, right? And kind of ignore the trinkets and ring sections for now, right? So those are the Azerites from the raid. That's the best, right? So let's move on quickly to best in slot in the entire game, right? So this is looking at all sources of gear, every way that you can gear possible, right? Benthic armor, raid, mythic plus, PvP even, any way you can get gear. Now we're only going to look at the base eye level or the highest they can drop without Warforging and Titan Forging, right? Of course, if you get a piece that Titan Forges to the maximum eye level and has a socket, sure, it can probably compete with one of those, right? But just for the base, what can you get? So Benthic armor is going to go up to 425, right? And some of them are really, really good, especially the few that actually have damage components. So those are going to be a best in slot, and you can actually get them right now. That's going to be the Wave Farseer's Arm Guard for your wrist, your Poem's Deep Sea Handguards for your gloves, and then the Akana's Restrider Boots for your boots. Now, as far as for what of them are the best, Akana's Restrider Boots are actually going to be the best out of all 3 of those. And so that's the one you want the most. So if you have a lot of pearls, this is the piece that you want to be rolling for, right? There's a vendor in Nashatar where you can just talk to them. You can buy Benthic boots for 5 mana pearls. You can just keep buying it until you roll the boots. The other thing to note for Benthic gear is that they can roll a socket. So if you are going to be rolling for these boots, you know, if you have enough pearls to spare, you know, to upgrade it to 425 and then also to re-roll, you might want to re-roll first to try to get the boots with sockets, because once you get a socket on the boots, whenever you do upgrade it, it'll keep the socket, and that's going to be very, very valuable. Sockets is going to be very, very strong in the upcoming patch and the raid, of course, right? They increased the stats of the gems by a little bit. Now they did nerf it, but it's still very valuable to have a socket on a piece of gear. And then for weapons, it's the same as we just talked about previously, right? You want the highest base eye level because that's the potential to Warforge the highest, and weapons eye level is king for them. So the best weapons are going to be the ones from the raid. Now, obviously, if you don't raid, then maybe Mythic Plus and the Cash can be okay for you too. For the Azerite pieces, interesting enough, right, we talked about how you could actually go triple Coastal Hot Blood, you know, with Embroidered Ferocity, with 1 Simmering Rage and 1 Reckless Flurry. That might actually not be what's the best simming right now. So right now, the shoulder piece that you can currently get from Mythic Plus, the Sithraki Binder's Pauldrons, which actually has a Swirling Sands as a second ring, is actually pretty good because, right, with triple Coastal Hot Blood, crit goes up. And what does Swirling Sands do? It gives you a buttload of crit, right? You get 1,000 crit for 12 seconds. Of course, once you get the 455 version, that's going to go up even higher, right? So that's why it's kind of simming like that, why Reckless Fury kind of fell off. And also, especially with some of the ways some of the traits work, the value of Reckless Fury reducing your recklessness isn't as high value, and then maybe just the damage right now isn't enough for it to take over all that other stuff. So Reckless Fury has kind of fallen down a little bit. You might start seeing people just run without Reckless Flurry at all. The other thing is some versions of these Azerite pieces combined, you might only have 2 Coastal Hot Bloods versus 3. But this is looking at single target. I'm very, very confident on any boss that has any type of ad spawn. We're going to see the similar thing as we saw in the current raid, right? BOD and Crucible of Storm that you might probably want a setup that gives you triple Cold Steel Hot Blood. We have the Helmet from Mythic Plus, Helm of Abyssal Malevolence. Shoulders are also from Mythic Plus, the Sithraki, Binders, Pauldrons, and then the chest, interestingly enough, is going to come from PvP. Now, this is the only piece of gear that I put here for PvP, but of course, right, the first columns of all these are what's best in slot, and then the second column are any, you know, thing that you can switch it out for. So if you don't PvP at all, you can of course get the Naga Centaur Shell Plate from the new raid. Now for PvP, you don't actually have to be a gladiator to get the highest eye level piece. You just have to be 2100 plus rating, and you can get the highest eye level Azerite piece in your cache. So I think that's a misconception that people have. You don't have to be 2400 to get 445 eye level Azerite pieces. You only have to be 2100. So it does make it a little bit easier, but of course, if you can't reach that, just get the chest from the raid, right? That one shouldn't be too difficult to get considering it's literally from the first boss, right? That's like Loot Pinata. Everybody should be able to get this very, very easily. As far as for waste, we talked about it from the previous one, right? Queen Azara waste, great. It does damage, great. Now, the legs are going to be interesting because those best in slot are probably still going to be the ones from Una, right? Those are doing crazy amounts of damage right here. The leg plates of Endbound Anguish. If your target has a lower health percentage than you, your abilities have a high chance to sacrifice some of your health to deal, you know, a good amount of damage to your opponent. This thing actually does a pretty significant amount of damage on single target. It does 4.5 to 4.7% of your damage, right? If there's AoE, maybe it goes to a lower 4%, maybe it drops a little bit lower, but it is a significant amount of damage to have these pants. And considering, right, something that we didn't have before from, you know, 8.0, 8.1 is that you're not going just from one raid to another raid with 30 eye levels. Because Crucible of Storms comes in between these two raids, the eye level that Una drops is actually pretty good, right? And especially if you can get a Warforge or Titan Forge going on for these pants, nothing will even come close. Even now, if I'm simming the 425 version of these pants, it beats out anything very dramatically. So definitely get these pants if you can get them. I'm not sure how many people are still going to be trying to clear Mythic Una when the new raid comes out, but you know, if you have strength users in your raid, they're probably going to really want this. On top of that, your trinkets, lurkers, and Sidious Gift, right? That's the mastery trinket from Una 2, right? When you use it, it gives you a buttload of mastery, and then every 1 second you start taking more damage. That trinket is still probably going to be very, very strong, and if you can kill Una still when the new raid comes out, you definitely want to do that. And then for other trinkets, right, the Mythic Plus ones, your Gora Crushed Butcher's Block is probably going to be the best one. Another one that might not be so bad is the Razan's Gleaming Eye from Untitled Chapter. And of course, the few raid trinkets I think can also be pretty good. But the only problem is I think the active trinkets might be good, but I don't know how well they'll compete with lurkers. So for example, all three active trinkets, I think we should keep an eye on. They could potentially be good, right? Vision of Demise, when you activate it, gives you a bunch of haste, and then the lower percent your target's HP is, you get even more haste on a 1 minute cooldown. That's a very, very short cooldown. That's a lot of haste. And then the Ashvane's Razor Coral, we're not exactly sure how well this is going to work. If the corals are going to stack infinitely, how long it lasts, and exactly how much crit you can get. So this one could also be really strong. And then the Azara's Found the Power. When you just look at this trinket, 3,353 strength at a mythic level, that's a lot of strength. So all those three active trinkets, they could be pretty good. It looks like the two equipped ones, they're not singing that well, so I don't think they're that great. So these two are probably going to be meh, and you're probably just going to be using a Mythic Plus trinket in that situation. So that's basically it for this. And of course, like I mentioned, right, best instances, you can click on the sims if you want to see it. Condensed Life Force as your major is the best. Crucible of Flame as your minor. Now this is all talking about rank 3s. And also when you get your third minor, eventually once you hit 65 on your neck, it's probably going to be Memory Lucid Dreams as the third. Right now I'm only simming combination of 2 essences, and what comes in second place is a Memory Lucid Dreams instead of the Crucible of Flame minor. And if you guys really want to, by the way, you guys right now can definitely play Anger Management if you want, especially if you have Lucid and Memory Dreams somewhere in there. But, you know, without it, right, Siegebreaker is still the best. And sometimes even with it, Siegebreaker is still better. But if you really hate Siegebreaker and you really like Anger Management, now is probably the best time to play it. And yeah, if you guys want access to the sheet, just check out the link in the description down below. Of course, you guys can always ask me any questions either here in the comments, or you can come visit the stream, twitch.tv/Kelade, where I'll also be streaming the Eternal Palace raid in a couple of days. And as always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.